Fantastic. Well, welcome everyone. This is our Stormwater Awareness Week presentation. This is our first one for the week. So we welcome you to Stormwater Awareness Week and to this presentation. We are going to be talking about macroinvertebrates, the mighty macros. Hopefully you all received the mighty macros that I sent to you earlier today. We are going to reference that in a couple of points, and you will be able to use that possibly later in this presentation and hopefully in the future. So we have that for you. To do introductions, my name is Linda Pettit. I'm one of the environmental education specialists here at the Franklin Soil and Water Conservation District. And as environmental education specialists, we do school programs, teacher workshops, and community events, all about our soil and water resources. We are working on the whole Zoom presentation type thing and have actually been really excited that teachers are requesting programs. So we've been able to go into some classrooms this way, which has been kind of cool. So I will let Amy introduce herself and then we'll go from there. Kurt.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Tressler. I work with Linda in environmental education. So we're eager to share this program with you and excited to be with you today. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Kurt Callio. I'm a watershed resource specialist, but I also work with Linda and Amy on the education team, and I have a particular interest in macroinvertebrates. So this is a program that I'm really excited to be able to present to you all.
And with that, Kurt, I think we're going to go ahead and let you talk about the video that we had on, and have people had a chance to answer the polling questions? Or how do we want to do that? I'm going to let you take it from here for the polling questions, Kurt.
There really aren't any polling questions on the video. We just simply asked some sort of general questions about what you noticed, any things you wondered about, things that you were reminded of. I don't know if people have any comments on what they saw or questions. I'd be glad to talk about either one, provide some information related to what you saw, if that'd be helpful, or if you just have some general comments, would be great.
I do not see anything coming up in the chat box. Do you want to describe the video just a little bit for so people know what they were watching or what they were looking at?
Sure. That was a video that was taken through a microscope. I shot it at a workshop I was doing. We were looking at a variety of critters, and I was just decided to shoot some video on it. I'm actually going to pull it up here again.
Great.
Why isn't it wanting to pull up?
It's been a technology challenge day. I can just say that from the very beginning.
Oh, there it is. Okay. This critter in the middle, on the edge now, is a riffle beetle. You can see what's known as an isopod or sow bug in there. All these little cases, I don't know if you can tell they're cases, but these little things here are actually pupae. The pupal cases for black flies. These are empty pupal cases. It means the flies already emerged. This is a flatworm making its way through. May have used those somewhere along the way in biology. We got a little mayfly sitting up here. I think that one's actually deceased, but we won't say anything about that. The thing squirming around is called a non-biting midge. You can see the riffle beetle trying to make its way through all the detritus. This little black fly larva, they have little sticky like silk and hooks on the bottom, so they can attach themselves to rocks and kind of wave in the water. And this is a little mayfly that had dashed by, just kind of making its presence known. We're back to the riffle beetle now. Got the sow bug here. And this is actually a little non-biting midge that's got a little case here. This is a little case that's made where it lives. And this is another variety of the same kind of critter that is free living, that doesn't build cases. So that gives you a little idea of some of the things that that were in the video, and we'll talk more about them a little later in the program.
Excellent. Thanks, Kurt. So we're going to get started with what are macroinvertebrates, where do you find them, and that type of thing. So I am going to try to share my screen. And let's do slideshow. Let me see if I can do that. Slideshow. Come on, we can do it from the beginning. Come on. Awesome. I've had computer issues, as I said earlier, so please bear with me, everyone, and I appreciate that. So Mighty Macros is just a fun title that we put to the macroinvertebrates so that we can take kind of a closer look. There's a lot going on in the water that we really don't pay much attention to. Many people don't even know they're there. So what are macroinvertebrates? Macroinvertebrates simply means macro. It's large enough you can see it with your own eyes. You don't need a microscope. A hand lens can be helpful sometimes. Just because we say they're large enough to see, that doesn't mean they're huge. That is the hardest thing if you're taking children in the water to look for macroinvertebrates. The hardest thing is to get them to look for the tiny things. You can see them looking in the net there. And I always say the first thing, when you hold it up, I do not want to hear in 5 seconds, I don't see anything. You have to really look harder. Some of these guys will fit on the end of a pencil eraser and have room to spare. They're little, but they're in there. And again, you don't need a microscope to see them. They're not microscopic. Invertebrate just means it doesn't have a backbone. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So that's what we're looking at. And then aquatic, obviously they live in water habitats. There are different aquatic macroinvertebrates that live in, say, a pond or a lake habitat compared to streams. Some need more of the flowing water. Some don't need, can handle the still water better. So there'll be a little bit of a difference. But we're going to be looking at aquatic macroinvertebrates. Taking a closer look at them, like I said, they don't have a backbone. That doesn't mean they all look the same. So some have shells, like you see the snail there on the left, and there's a variety of snails in our water. Kurt mentioned the aquatic sow bug earlier. That's like the roly-poly on land. By the way, the roly-poly on land or pill bug, sow bug on land are the only terrestrial crustaceans that we have. So this is a crustacean that you're looking at related to crayfish, lobster, shrimp, crabs, all of that. And the roly-poly on land is the only terrestrial one that we have. And then the other thing I'm representing here is the mayfly nymph is up there on the right. And many of these critters that live in the water are children of adult flying insects. So you see the mayfly on the right and the adult mayfly underneath it. And many of the critters we're going to be talking about today actually are the children of adult flying insects. Many people don't realize that they spend actually more time in the water than they do on land as adults. So they have to have a really happy childhood. So these are some of the things, some of the differences that we're looking at today. So where do you find these guys? Again, in an aquatic habitat, but there's certain places to look and different ones can be found in different places. So riffle zones, we're going to talk about in a second, underneath rocks. A lot of times you can turn rocks over and find them running around on those rocks or attached to those rocks. Some of them love to hide, crayfish, for example, and you'll find them in tree roots or under tree roots. Others really prefer to be in beds of vegetation. They'll be in the plants along the side of the river or in the river. Some of them like to hide there to feed on their prey that might be swimming by or come to feed on that vegetation. So different places for different macroinvertebrates you're looking for. And I added here, even on litter and debris. Some of these guys don't realize that that tire that got thrown into the river is not some new kind of rock. And you can look at some litter that may have been there for a period of time, cinder blocks. I've seen shopping carts, things like that with animals living on and under them. So they are very adaptable in some cases and will use a variety of different things as their habitat or their home. So a riffle zone, I always tell children it's like Ruffles potato chips. It has ridges. So as you're looking at that water flowing over the rocks, and again, it needs to be very shallow. In most of these cases, the critters like to live in shallow areas. So a riffle zone, I'm talking, ankle, calf deep. I never let children go above their knees. Then the water is flowing way too fast. You're not going to find nearly as many critters, and it starts to get really dangerous. So we're talking, like I said, ankle to calf deep. That water's flowing over the rocks. It looks like mini rapids. And that water is really important as it's moving like that, because as it's stirred up, it's providing more oxygen in the water for the animals that live there. And many of these macroinvertebrates need to have a high oxygen content. That's super important. So that's what a riffle zone is, if you're unfamiliar with that. Little mini rapids, water flowing over the rocks. Other places that I mentioned, just roots that are along the edge of the stream bank, logs that are jutting out. They can provide a habitat for all kinds of different animals. If you look really closely on here, you may see that there's actually a snake sunning himself right here on this little log that's sticking out. Underneath there could likely be a crayfish or something like that hiding under. I mentioned you could just turn rocks over, and right here we have some critters that are right on the rocks. A lot of times you'll find caddisfly cases or snails or things like that right attached to the rocks. Water pennies very commonly, and we'll talk some more about those as we go along. But just turning rocks over is a great way to find them. They like to hide on and under. And then I mentioned the plant life. Some right in the, if there's plants growing right up in the river, sometimes that's a great place to find them, and definitely along the edge. It's a great place to look for some of these different macroinvertebrates. So why do we monitor? The seine there is because we use a seine net quite often to monitor, but we do it to find out about water quality. We want to know if there's any problems in the river, and this is a great way, biological way to check water quality. The aquatic macroinvertebrates are great indicators of water quality because some of them have to live in very clean water, have to have a high oxygen content. Some can handle just a little bit, and others, as I would say, just don't care. Those that are in the group 1 taxa, and they're all broken into magical groups, group 1, group 2, and group 3. Those that are in the group 1 taxa are animals, organisms that have to have a high quality water. They're great indicators. If we find a lot of these different critters, that means we must have a good water quality. They have to have a high oxygen content. They have to be able to breathe that water and be able to find their way around and so forth. So they don't want a lot of sediment at the bottom. Some of them will, again, burrow under the rocks and things like that. So if we find a lot of these different organisms, that lets us know we have a good high water quality situation. Then there's the group 2, which is kind of the middle of the road. They prefer a better water quality. Of course, they can handle a little bit of pollution, but not a lot. They still need a good oxygen content. They still need, obviously, good water quality. Some of these guys, again, hide a little bit more and things like that, but still indicators that the stream is okay. So we try to find these as well. Then we have the group 3. These are the ones that I say just don't care. They can live anywhere. Some of them actually breathe oxygen from the air, not from the water, so it's not as much of a problem. Some of them just have different ways of getting the oxygen or handling the oxygen, so they're not as dependent. Now, with that being said, if we find group 3 taxa, it does not mean it's a poor quality stream. They can live anywhere. They're not going to be upset about great water quality. It's just that you're not going to find the other ones where the water quality is poor. So you look for as much biodiversity as possible. The many different critters that you find, the better that habitat is to support all the different kinds of life that are there. So like I said, if you find these, it doesn't mean the stream is terrible. If you only find these, then you might want to check into the water quality. There's a problem of some kind. So how is the water quality bad, or why is the water quality bad? What are the sources of pollution? So we have point sources of pollution, we have non-point sources of pollution, we have stream bank erosion. All of these are adding to it. Obviously today we're talking about stormwater and stormwater runoff. So we're looking at the different things that can land in that storm drain that from the water that runs across the land, like lawn chemicals, oil and gas, salt from roads, dog waste, and obviously so much more. Land use is really a determining factor in the water quality. If there's, chemical factory nearby, then you're going to be watching for that. If there's a lot of construction happening, so a lot of soils being moved around and things like that, then that could make a difference. If there's a lot of litter and trash, it's just how the land is being used is going to make a difference because of the other types of pollution that can cause. Point sources of pollution are just a discharge from some type of pipe going into the river. That pipe can be followed back to wherever it's coming from. And so that's a point source because you can point to the source, you know exactly where it's coming from. These are some different possibilities that could be point sources. Storm drain is a really tough one. It's a pipe, so we do follow it back. It's a point source, but once it gets back up to the storm drain, then you never know exactly where the pollutants are coming from that enter it. So that's kind of an iffy one. But these are some different things that can obviously affect the quality of the water. Stream banks. Whenever we go into a river to check water quality, the first thing we look for is what do the sides of the stream look like? What do the banks look like? How much, how much vegetation is there? We look for those pipes that are coming in. Plant life makes a huge difference. Needless to say, this is not going to be a great water quality stream. After many rainstorms, you're going to have a lot of erosion happening here. A lot of people don't realize soil erosion is one of our worst pollution problems in Ohio's rivers. It ranks right up there with stormwater, but erosion is a big issue in our streams and ponds. So storm drains, only rain should go down the drain. Those are there to get the rainwater off the roads as quickly as possible so our roads don't flood. They're there for safety reasons. They're not there to take our litter and trash away. So we really need to remember those storm drains and being careful about what we put on our land because it affects the quality of the water around us. So things that we look for, like I said, we look for the color of the water. We look for the stream shape. We look for the amount of vegetation. All of these types of things that land uses, like I said, these are all things that help us kind of with indicators of what the quality of the stream is going to be. Those macroinvertebrates then are kind of our key. They're going to let us know were we right with our guesses, and they're going to be able to tell us a little bit more about why or what that really is going on in there. And the reason why the macroinvertebrates are a great indicator is because that's their habitat. They're not going to be able to just get up and move if things aren't great. So you were going to lose some of the biodiversity if the water quality isn't appropriate. When you do chemical testing, you know what it's like at that particular moment. You don't know what it's like for a longer period of time. Since the macroinvertebrates have to live in that water for a longer period of time, they're a better judge of what's going on for that longer period of time. The Riparian Corridor is a huge thing. This would be a much happier stream with the Riparian Corridor covered like that than the one that we saw that with the eroding stream bank. So again, these are things that we look for. So now we're going to test you and kind of see what you think about water quality and where some of that situation could come from. And I found as I was researching for our Swiftlet, like the Mighty Macros is a Swiftlet, the one this month is on the stormwater. And so I was doing some research on that, and I happened to find from the EPA, let's see if I can find it, here we go, a quiz to kind of get an idea of where, change please, of where the water quality could be coming from. So I want to share this one instead. So we have some different things here for you to look at. If somebody either wants to unmute yourself and shout out, or if you want to put in the chat, what is a potential source of a water quality issue that you see here? This is called What's Wrong with This Picture. And like I said, it's by the EPA. Don't tell me there's no issues here. What do you see that's an issue or a problem?
We just had one of our participants said waste into the storm drain.
Aha. So the man is pouring motor oil right down the storm drain. Never pour used motor oil or antifreeze down a storm drain, onto the soil, or into a waterway. Put the used oil or antifreeze in a sturdy container, take it to a local service station or other approved center. Good point. What's another one?
We had another mention of litter and oil draining into the drain. So somebody else noticed that in the photograph too, right about the time we were talking about it.
That's pretty obvious. And that's a really good one to note. And I will tell you, I've had people tell me that they have seen that happen. So that's definitely an issue. You mentioned the litter. Yeah, the man is throwing litter into the street. Again, we may not necessarily think about that, but anything that goes into the street is going to end up in the storm drain, most likely when it rains or the wind blows or whatever. So that is definitely an issue.
We also have Linda, the car is leaking oil, and another comment about fertilizer.
Okay, so we definitely have the car leaking here. And again, it's right along the edge of the stream. All that's going to, or sorry, the street. That's going to wash right down that storm drain. It's going to end up in the creek or river. So this suggests please get your drips and leaks fixed as soon as possible. The fertilizer over here, we have a definite issue with her. She is not using her nitrogen and phosphorus appropriately, her fertilizers appropriately. You need to really be careful about when you apply them, how you apply them. The amount that you use, really follow the label on those fertilizers and pesticides.
And then we also have excess sprinkler water, which also may contain fertilizer.
And I don't know about you guys, but it always drives me crazy when they're watering the sidewalk, right? The sidewalk does not need to be watered. It is not going to grow. That doesn't help in any way, shape, or form. So this is definitely an issue. So as that water's on the sidewalk, it's going to really quickly move anything that's on or near the sidewalk. So if there's any extra fertilizer, if there's any other materials, they will be washed with that water. I always say the faster water moves, the stronger it is. So with all of that force of it coming out right there and running across a paved surface, you're going to have an excess of items moved right along. And then there is a storm drain right there. So it can definitely pull right over to there as well. So the last one that I'm going to point out right here is the grass clippings. So he's putting them into plastic bags, and you could keep them somewhere and use them later for compost. That would really be what we would suggest. We would mow them like you see in this little picture here. That would be a great way to go. If you could mow the leaves this time of year and use them, they will break down into the soil. They're going to make your soil richer and healthier. We say leaf it on the lawn. If you have a garden, you could rake those and put them over the garden. Anything to help get that organic material back into the soil and not have it go down the storm drain is a really good thing. So again, this is an interactive that you can look at. It's just what's wrong with this picture. It's a non-point source pollution awareness by the EPA. And I will stop sharing. And that's really what I wanted to mention. Again, that basis, that background, why we're using macroinvertebrates during Stormwater Awareness Week is because they are a great indicator of the quality of the water. That stormwater is going to make a big difference on which macroinvertebrates can live there and how they're surviving and things like that. I believe I am going to hand it over to Kurt next, if I remember correctly, and he's going to take it from there and tell you a lot more about those lovely macroinvertebrates we just mentioned.
So we did have, we did have one question, Linda. I'm just going to circle back around to, I believe it was when you were talking about the different levels of tolerance with pollution with our different species of macroinvertebrates. There was a question about if you could give examples of those different species. So I'll let you maybe address that, or maybe Kurt, you're also going to talk about that.
I'll talk about those in my presentation.
Perfect. And that's why I didn't mention him, because I thought I didn't want to steal his thunder. If we don't answer that question really well, those slides did have the different macros on them, and I can always come back to that if we need to. All right. Take it away, Kurt.
There's also a question about a creek, and I'm not sure what that was in reference to. Was it something that you were showing? I'm not sure.
Oh, and honestly, I don't remember exactly where that picture was that was taken. And there's always a question about creek versus river. That's a really fuzzy distinction, by the way, between the two. And again, I don't know where that picture was exactly taken.
Okay. Well, I am going to show you some things related to macroinvertebrates, and we're going to start with a bit of a review question. Do a little quiz on, is it a macroinvertebrate, true or false? So this critter here, I like to think about it a little bit, and if you think it's a macroinvertebrate, think true, click true. If you think it isn't a macroinvertebrate, click false. I'll give you the answer in a moment here. Macroinvertebrate, true or false, question 1.
Question 1, right.
I'd say there are no wrong answers, but there are. So we don't know who answered what.
Right, it's anonymous. Just go ahead and vote, please. Must be very thought-provoking. We haven't gotten any answers yet.
It only submits the whole test, not question by question. Okay, technology problem.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, we tried.
We could also have people throw it in the chat box if they want to.
That's true too. That was a macroinvertebrate. It's a water scorpion. Now we're going to get another shot at a critter. So what was the little wiggly thing there? These little wiggly things. Macroinvertebrate or not a macroinvertebrate?
Again, just throw yes or no up in the chat box if you would.
Kurt, we have a couple no's coming in from the chat box.
Okay. It is not a macroinvertebrate, it's a tadpole. So we got one more here. This is just a still picture. What do you think? Is that a macroinvertebrate or not? Some of my favorite pictures, actually.
We have all no's coming in again.
Okay. Again, you're right. Not a macroinvertebrate, it's a salamander, or they were a bunch of salamanders, actually. And I think this is the last one I have. So what do you think, macroinvertebrate or not?
And we've got yeses coming in for that one.
Okay. That one is it's a giant water bug. They're kind of cool critters. The males carry the eggs around on their backs till the eggs hatch. So kind of interesting critter that way. Oh, I did have one more. Macroinvertebrate or no?
We have yeses coming in, Kurt.
Okay. It actually isn't a macroinvertebrate. Those are actually water fleas or Daphnia. They're considered too small to be macroinvertebrates. It's kind of funky because you can see them a lot of times with the naked eye, and those particular there are actually pretty large, but they're considered plankton and are considered more on the microorganism side of things than the macroorganism side of things. But they are invertebrates, and the line between macro and micro is obviously kind of arbitrary, because there are macroinvertebrates that are smaller than water fleas, and those water fleas where water mites are smaller than those critters. When we divide up macroinvertebrates, there are a variety of ways we do it. One of the ways is by their life cycle. Some of them do not metamorphose at all during the life cycle. So this is one of the sow bugs Linda talked about. You can see the sow bug on the left, and in the video, there was a big sow bug down here and a little one up here. They just get bigger as they get older, so they don't actually change in shape or form. Some metamorphose partially. This is a mayfly, and that's what a nymph is. We call them nymphs if they metamorphose partially. You can also call them larvae. That's often how they're used. And part of how you can tell is these are actually immature wings. These are going to turn into wings. So this nymph is going to get bigger and bigger, and then eventually it's going to come to the surface. Its body is going to crack open, and one of these is going to emerge. If you've ever been up by Lake Erie at certain times of year, they can get really pretty dense up there. We were out doing some workshop this summer, Amy was, and a little mayfly decided to take a perch on her hat. Okay, some of these critters metamorphose entirely. This is a non-biting midge, and on the left you can see the larva, and on the right they turn into these pupae. They remain in a pupal state for a while, and they'll eventually emerge as these little fly-like critters. I often say, if you ever walk through a swarm of little flying bugs along a creek and you're not getting bitten, there's a good chance that they are these little non-biting midges or chironomids. They tend to emerge all at the same time and then mate and then die. This is a little question to see if you can, I'm going to have to, you're going to do this as a polling question, but I'm going to do it as just letting you make comments in the thing. This is the larval immature form here on the left. Which do you think is the adult on the right? A, B, C, or D? Any guesses on that?
We had one guess. Oh, B changed to D. It's the only guess I've seen so far. Oh, got another B.
Okay, this is a partial metamorphosing critter, and the B and D they're both in the same grouping. They're both under the same larger grouping called Odonata, but this is actually a dragonfly down at D. Damselflies have a little different looking larva, a little more and are a little more delicate, but this is a rather robust dragonfly larva. Okay, here's another critter. Going to give you a chance to guess again.
We've got C's coming in, Kurt.
Okay.
One with a question mark.
This is a really tough one. We find this one kind of amusing, actually. This is obviously not partial metamorphosis. It's this critter changes entirely, but it's actually a larval form of the critter on the right. That's D, item D. The the larvae can be huge. They can be like 3 inches long and kind of gnarly looking. And they turn into this really delicate little flying critter that I say looks like a mosquito on steroids or something. They don't bite as adults, but they do look like sort of like a cross between a daddy longlegs and a mosquito. Another way you can divide up macroinvertebrates is legs and no legs. So there are many macroinvertebrates that have legs, many that don't. Shell versus no shell. We've got some over here with a shell, a bunch that don't have shells. You can also, how many legs do they have? The insects have 6 legs, but like the isopods, these are amphipods or scuds. There's a crayfish. You've got some water mites over there, I believe. Those have either 10 or 8 legs or more potentially. Now, if you look in this video here, you can see the flatworm, no legs. The riffle beetle has 6. This is mayfly has 6. The chironomids have none. There's some little wiggly worms in there that also have none. But you use those kinds of questions to help sort out which macroinvertebrates are which. Black fly, again, has none. Another way you can divide up macroinvertebrates is where do they live? Now, Linda talked about riffles, and these are some of the critters you're going to often find in riffles. This is a riffle beetle, so it makes a lot of sense to be found in riffle. This is a stonefly. They need a lot of oxygen, so they're typically found in riffles. Mayflies tend to need a lot of oxygen, as do caddisflies. So riffles are great places for them to live. Another place that critters live is along the edges of streams, and you're going to find the water scorpions there. They do not swim well, and if they were in a riffle, they just would get washed away. But they can cling to the grass, and they kind of crawl slowly. You can see that they might be well camouflaged in the grass, and they wait for things to come along that they could grab. Similarly, with water bug, it's in the same boat, that it would not be able to handle a current well, so it lives on the edges in the grass, waits for things to float by, and can grab them there as well. This is a damselfly larva. That was item B, was a damselfly. This is what a damselfly larva looks like. And again, they're not strong swimmers, and they hang on the grasses in the edges there. These are all predators that kind of wait for their prey to float down to them, hanging onto the grasses and roots along the edges of the creeks. Some critters love to live on rocks. The black fly larvae with their sticky rear ends stick themselves to rocks and wave in the water. This is actually a kind of caddisfly that builds its case out of little rocks, and it attaches itself. The blue circled critters are these snail case caddisflies that, again, build a case, looks like a snail, and they tend to be on rocks, scraping algae off the surface of the rocks. And these are actually cases of caddisflies that are pupating, turning into adults, and they pupate attached to rocks. Leaves are another place that critters can hang out. Here you can see a caddisfly going along a leaf. Leaves are attractive to things that shred vegetation. They shred the leaf up, and that is one of the ways they contribute to the food chain, because other things eat the things that they shred up. Worms are also one of the things you'll see in along leaves. This is actually, I think all these critters came from a single leaf. There are a whole bunch of them on that leaf. Another dimension of the critters is how do they breathe? Some just breathe through their skin. Black flies just breathe through their skin, worms, midges. Others breathe through what are called spiracles on the back of this cranefly larva. It's got these 2 little holes, and the water comes into its body that way and is absorbed inside, the oxygen's absorbed inside the body. Some of them take water in and out the same hole. Some of them, it goes through their body and out another orifice. Some breathe through siphons or snorkels. This is called a rat-tailed maggot, very descriptive term. And they have a very long siphon that they can stick up to the water to breathe. Mosquitoes have a smaller siphon, little snorkel that they hang from the surface of the water, breathing through this little tube. It's part of why they don't live on turbulent water and flowing water, because they can't hang on the surface. Water bugs have a little actually loop back here, and they collect water, or they collect a little air bubble on this little loop. And when they go underwater, they have this little air bubble that they use to breathe. Some have a layer of air underneath. This is a beetle, and the hairs underneath their body are hydrophobic. They don't, they repel water. And so they're able to collect a little layer of air under their body that they can use when they go underwater. A lot of them use gills. This is the damselfly larva again. These 3 appendages on the back are gills, and they wave these gills through the water, collects oxygen. This mayfly, if you see these little oars along the side, that's their gills. This caddisfly, all these little hairs along the bottom are their gills. And the dragonfly actually has gills inside its body, and it pumps oxygen in and out of its rear end to get it flowing over the gills. This can give you a little idea. You can see the gills of the mayfly here in this video. See how they wave in the water. They can actually wave them physically themselves. They can make the gills wave in the water to help them collect oxygen. So how do they move? A variety of strategies. Black flies will sway in the water, but when they want to walk, they kind of move like an inchworm. They'll put their head down and then move forward, and put their head down and move forward. You've seen worms move before. They're able to extend their bodies. They have little hairs along the side, and by moving their muscles, they can squirm along the surface. Some of them just walk, like these little isopods or sow bugs. They just walk their way along with their 10 legs and make their way across the surface. And finally, some of them walk really slowly. That's a riffle beetle, and they are not very quick walkers. And often they show up rather late in the sample because you don't see them. They're just hanging out below the detritus and such. Okay, some other examples. Non-biting midges don't have legs, and they can crawl a little bit, kind of inch their way around the bottom. But a lot of times they just thrash around in the water. They can't really control where they're going, but they'll thrash around and see where they wind up, so to speak. Although they can kind of inch their way along. They've got little things called prolegs in the front, but they can't truly crawl. Clams, I just love watching this little video because they have a little foot that they stick out, so to speak. And needless to say, they move very slowly. And that little foot can be used to pull itself along. The foot moves ahead of it, and it can be used to pull the shell along. There's a kind of mayfly. These are called little swimmer mayflies, and they just dart. They do swim, and they swim like a dolphin, kind of. They flip their bodies up and down like a dolphin, and as you can see, they're rather quick. They're probably the quickest swimming things that I can think of right now. This is another mayfly. They're mayflies that really don't swim a lot. They kind of crawl, and in a pinch, they'll kind of wiggle their bodies side to side, but they're not very good swimmers. Thought I'd show you, damselflies do a kind of combination of things. They can walk, as you'll see. They walk here, but they also swim. They swim more like a shark. They wave their tails back and forth. And they've got their gills back here, and you can see this little one trying to swim that way, but they can also walk. Dragonflies are the most interesting one to me. They can crawl, as you'll see here. They usually, actually, adults can't crawl, if I'm not mistaken. The larva can crawl. You can see it's breathing through the back end here. That's where the water goes in and out over its gills. But if you watch what happens next, it almost looks like it's on the moon or something, because it can kind of like, it looks like it jumps. I don't think it actually jumps. They can expel water out this back end, this particular species, and they can jet themselves. And so I think this is actually jetting itself a little bit when it's doing what you see there. Okay, and then this is one shot that'll show you a variety of different movement strategies. You got the damselfly walking, you've got the chironomid thrashing, you've got this little cranefly squirming around, and then you have the little mayfly that is swimming rather quickly. How do they eat? Some of them are predators. The damselflies, I've watched them eat mosquitoes and such, and these dragonflies are really rather voracious little predators. I've seen one taking on a small minnow. So they grab them and they, engulf them. On the other hand, these guys are piercers. They have a little sharp point on the end of their bodies. They will pierce their prey and suck out the body fluids. Kind of gross, but that's what they do. Actually, turns out that's sort of what flatworms do as well. They can eat detritus, but they can also be a predator on things. There are things that eat bacteria and things of that order, little small algae. There's some that scrape algae and other things on the surface of the rock. There's some like black flies that filter things coming down the creek in the water. There's some that scrape things off. I'm sorry, that's actually supposed to be shredders. There's some that shred leaves and things like that they eat. So there's quite a few different strategies they use. They also have different adaptations. This little guy is a mayfly. It's got these flaps. Its gills are under these flaps. And what that does, I believe, is it helps keep things from covering their gills. So if there's a lot of sediment in the water or something like that, it helps protect the things they use to breathe. Also, this little thing here is a flap that covers the gills in an isopod. Okay, I need to, notice we're running out of time. Another adaptation, these guys have little doors they can use to cover their gills. And we talked about sensitivity to pollution before. These are caddisflies, water pennies, riffle beetles, and these are mayflies over here. These are some of the most sensitive critters, and I've covered them in blue. This clam, cranefly, crayfish, dragonfly, and damselfly are in the next category that are kind of in the middle, the isopods there too. And then the worm, flatworm, non-biting midge, and leech, and blackfly, and this kind of snail are in the least sensitive pollution. And as Linda said, they can be in really nice creeks as well as creeks that are more polluted. And this is just showing you some of the more sensitive critters with the adults. So this is a stonefly with an adult stonefly, caddisfly with an adult caddisfly, and a mayfly with adult mayfly. Those are the most sensitive critters. And of course, here we've got our little tepulid, the cranefly with its an adult, and they're in the middle as far as sensitivity goes. Oh, just showing some more adults. This is the damselfly with its adult and the dragonfly with its larva. Okay, so Amy, would you like me to show the stormwater video now? Is that a better part of
Yeah, I think so. We did have one question for you, Kurt. It was, sure. Can you ID animals with the number of gills?
Not exactly. The damselfly clearly has 3 gills, so that would be one you could identify by the number of gills. It has those 3 little oars on the back that are gills. If you could see them with a microscope, mayflies can be identified by the number of gills and what segments they're on. So if you're looking with a microscope, you can count the number of gills and what segments those gills are on, and that can help you identify mayflies. In fact, that's an important way to identify mayflies. The gills also have different shapes with mayflies. So that is one that you can identify with a number of gills. I can't, well, there are others, it's the location of the gills, and it has to do with number. Like some have gills just coming off by their legs, and some have gills that look like really thick mops, and others, the gills are not as thick. And so you can use, it's less the number, more the location, and kind of the general number, not like 15 versus 5, but more like 50 or so versus 10 or so. So yeah, you can use it depending on the critter. In some cases, the number of gills can help you figure out what you got.
Are there any other questions for Kurt while he is pulling up a video about the different species that y'all got to see with regards to macroinvertebrates?
Amy, actually, I was going to bring up the stormwater video. Do you want me to?
Yeah, I think go ahead and play that stormwater video, and I will just, I'm going to lump in the Whitehall video with the resources at the very end.
Sounds great. Okay, so this is a video that I put together to help you see what stormwater looks like in real life and what the stormwater pollution looks like. So this is a stormwater pond here in Columbus, and you can see some of the things coming in. The grass that people didn't get off the pavements coming into this stormwater pond. There's a sheen of oil on this water that you may be able to see. Soap suds, probably from someone washing their car. You can see the litter coming into this stormwater pond. In my neighborhood, and this is what that would look like coming into a creek. That's an underwater view where you can see what the stormwater looks like. This is just taken by a stormwater pipe, and you can see all the stormwater coming in. This is by a construction site, and this construction site does not have good sediment controls on it. And you can see all the mud coming in from that construction site. This is Big Walnut Creek at Livingston Avenue, and this is probably 15 feet of creek that's filled with mud from that little pipe coming from a construction site. And you can see what a fisheye view of that is. Not a great view in terms of all the sediment and mud in the water. We sometimes don't realize the amount of water that comes with stormwater because it comes off so much surface. This is where a single stormwater pipe comes off over here. I was out with some students one day sampling this creek, and they're all of a sudden pointed over here, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that little pipe, you can see the water building. There's a little thunderburst that came through. And so what had been just a little trickle coming out of the pipe before, really the pipe should be dry if there hasn't been any rain. All of a sudden, this thing is turning into a torrent from this little thunderstorm. It's like a waterfall over there. And we'll get a little closer here in a moment. You can see the rain coming off the street, the cars driving by, splashing it. But this is all from one pipe running off a little area of land. And you can see why those pipes, when you get a rainstorm, this little creek, that's what it turns into after rainstorm because of all that stormwater going into the creek. Part of the problem is the creek goes up very fast because of all that stormwater, and then it goes down very fast, which is not a very natural state of affairs for a creek, and you get a lot of erosion. You can see how much erosion is coming off this bank here. And what that erosion does is it puts a lot of silt and such over the bottom. The critters like to live in between the spaces in the rocks, and there aren't spaces in this creek. This is a creek that does not have the same amount of silt and such in it. You can see how much nice space there is between the rock and the gravel and such to allow the critters to live a much better scenario for the aquatic life there. So that's what I've got, Amy.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kurt. So I'm going to just share real quickly on my screen here some last minute points to kind of wrap it up here. So as both Linda and Kurt have mentioned, we are celebrating Stormwater Awareness Week this week. And so the presentations that we are delivering, really, we are trying to focus on the importance of knowing what is going down the storm drain and the impact that it has then in our local environment. So in this case, really focusing on streams and the macroinvertebrates that are living within. So it really begins with our storm drains and thinking about what is ending up in our storm drains and remembering that really only rain should be going down the drain. This is a storm drain that's clogged with a lot of different things, including pollution, a lot of yard debris and things like that. And we just talked about how important the bottom habitat is for these macroinvertebrates. And so we really have to remember that we have kind of a collective impact potentially on these animals that are living in these streams and rivers by the things that we're doing in our communities and in our backyards here. So we want to leave it with a message of hope. There are lots of things that we can do in order to make a difference and keep these habitats clean and robust for the organisms that are living within. A lot of it has to do with just things that we can do in our own communities and backyards. So we have several different programs at Franklin Soil and Water Conservation District, which really are aimed at getting people to plant native plants, to pick up pet waste when you're out and about, and to take care of our lawns in a proper way. So kind of at the core of some of these solutions, planting native plants is a really great solution, especially when we're talking about soil erosion and the impacts that that can have in our local rivers and streams. I think Linda mentioned that soil is one of our biggest pollution problems that we have in our rivers and streams here in Ohio. So just thinking about the plants that we're planting or covering bare soil is a really great way to prevent that erosion from happening and keeping that soil sediment out of our rivers and streams, which ultimately can impact our macroinvertebrate species. In addition to that, picking up after our pets so that we don't have their waste flowing into our rivers and streams and adding things in that could be harmful to the animals that are living in there, or the water that we rely on for drinking water is a really important way to protect these organisms. And then right now, this is particularly meaningful during this time of the year when we're looking at our deciduous trees that are losing their leaves at this time, rethinking about the purpose that those leaves could serve in our lawns is a really great way to protect our local streams and rivers. So certainly we might have situations where we can't keep all of these leaves on our lawn, but I think Linda mentioned a little bit earlier when we were looking at the EPA website, taking those leaves, using your lawnmower to mulch them down into smaller pieces, and then considering those as a natural fertilizer instead of the application of lawn chemicals is a really great way to fertilize your lawn to help bulk up the nutrients that are in your soil and to support those soil organisms that are living in there too. So there's definitely a lot of things that we can do to protect the macroinvertebrates in our river and stream habitats. So let me exit out of here real quick. And I want to show you real quickly some resources. We didn't want to leave you empty-handed. I'm not sure what everybody's level of comfort is when it comes to searching for macroinvertebrates, but we want to leave you guys with some resources that you can use if you do want to go. Sorry, I think the problem is that I have this PowerPoint up. If you do want to go out into the field and survey for macroinvertebrates. So one of the things that we do have on our YouTube channel, and I'm not going to play this video, but it is available. We have Kurt out here doing some pretty great macroinvertebrate work. We went out and sampled, so we talk a lot about the different supplies that you need for sampling macroinvertebrates. We talk about resources like macroinvertebrate keys to help with identification. It's a 10-minute long video, so depending on what you do or maybe who you work with, if you're a teacher, this is something that could be very appropriate for using with students if you're trying to get them out in the field and do some of that sampling, or if you just have a personal interest in learning how to sample for macroinvertebrates. I think Linda shared with everybody ahead of time that we are doing swiftlets, which have different themes related to the work that we do at Franklin Soil and Water Conservation District. We did do one that was all about macroinvertebrates and included in it a key that you can use for some of our most common macroinvertebrates. This isn't necessarily broken down with regards to tolerance to pollution, but if you're just going out to appreciate and enjoy and sample and see what's out there, this should be a good guide to help you get started. And it also has some additional information about the animals on the back of it. And then in addition to that, there's a lot of different online resources that have different keys that can help you as you're learning to identify macroinvertebrates. So this one is out of Stroudwater Research Center. And by the way, I'm going to throw all these links into the chat box in just a moment here. So this is actually their photo key that they use. So this could be something that you might enjoy exploring. And then this is a common key that we use, the dichotomous key that we use when we work out in the field with students or adults who are maybe learning how to sample for the first time. and has been pretty useful for us as we have gone out there. So again, I'm going to throw all these up into the chat box. We want to thank you all so much for attending the program today. It looks like we do have some questions coming in, and it looks like maybe Kurt, you were able to answer some of those. Does anybody have any last questions before we end our Zoom meeting?
I was going to say that sediment can, I think, generally make it harder for organisms to get oxygen out of the water. What particularly takes the oxygen out is rotting vegetation. It's one of the things that is a problem if people put a lot of leaves or grass in the water, that it'll settle at the bottom of pools and it will rot. And that rotting will take the oxygen out of the water as it rots. So it's a big concern about getting too much vegetation in the water.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you so much. So with that, I'm going to finish throwing these up in the chat box. If anybody else wants to unmute and ask Linda or Kurt a question, please feel free to do so. And thank you all so much for attending with us today. We really, really appreciate it.
I also wanted to mention, if you have any further questions, you should all have my email address. I emailed you the materials this morning. And so if you come up with a question later that you didn't think of, or if you didn't get all these resources listed, or whatever, feel free to send me an email later. If I don't know the answer, I will ask Kurt and Amy and get the answer to you. So that's another option as well. We do appreciate you joining us, and remember to celebrate the rest of this week on stormwater awareness, help others realize what stormwater is and the issues that it causes, and so we can keep our streams clean for the animals that live there and for those of us who love water and water activities and things like that.
And I did put up my email if you'd like
Awesome.
to hold me directly too.
Thanks, Kurt. And we hope to see some of you later this week. Tomorrow we are doing What's in Our Water presentation with the Enviroscape watershed model. And on Friday, we'll be doing the soil erosion simulator, talking about erosion, that soil in the water, and actually doing an experiment showing how it happens with rainfall and things like that. So I know some of you have registered for other ones. If you haven't and you'd like to check them out, and hope to see you again later in the week.
And once we're able to go out in the field together again, hopefully we'll have some events where you can sample macroinvertebrates and see what they look like in person. It's a lot more fun.
Exactly. That'd be great.
Just seeing them in pictures.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.